My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm currently a regent. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people.
My name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent. I'm kind of a football fanatic. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans. Hello and welcome back to MagisTalk. I'm Ian Peoples and I'm joined by my co-host and brother Jesuit Dan Finucane. This week we're happy to have Miss Melissa Espat with us on the show.
Hello.
We're very happy to have Melissa on. Just to introduce her a little bit, Melissa teaches philosophy and at times theology and English. Some semesters at St. John's College, at the junior college, and also serves as their campus minister and does all sorts of things, leading prayer services, retreats, organizing on-campus masses, community service projects. She's a very busy person. And she started her career at St. Catherine's and then made her way to St. John's. And what's cool is Ian and I have had a chance to see Melissa in action. We've been on one of her retreats, and it's great to see her in her element. She is really impressive at her job. And we have her on the show today because she has a really good pulse on, or finger on the pulse of how adolescents and young people are feeling in the church and in society. And so we're excited to hear a little bit more of that today. And again, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and Father Jeremy, your co-worker,
Yes.
co-laborer in the vineyard,
Yes.
has been on our show twice already.
Right.
And this
No,
is your first time. I wonder what's taking you so long.
We don't want to talk about that. We don't talk about Bruno.
We don't talk about Zippel.
First of all, the idea that he gets to come twice, I'm really bummed. We won't talk about why, but
Well, depending on how today goes, we might have you on
I
again.
didn't make the cut before this. I had to bribe them, and I'm only here because of a bribe. So
Yes, some Queen Elizabeths in our pocket.
Yes.
So, yes.
those blue things, but it goes for a worthy cause, right?
Well, it is great to have you on, and something we
Thank
like
you.
to begin our interviews, especially like this, is just to ask about your upbringing and what role faith played in your life as you grew up. So can you share with us a little bit about your upbringing?
Okay, so I'm a Holy Redeemer girl. Catholic school all my life, and I was attending Holy Redeemer at the time when Bishop Wright was, at the time, Father Wright. He was the manager of the Catholic schools, and so we grew up having him as the leader of the church, leader of the school. Needless to say, it was a very strict type of upbringing when it came to the church. We knew every single rule that the church would have, and to a certain extent, I still have that with me. You don't do this at a church, you don't do that because it's not accepted. But Father Wright at the time, Bishop Wright, he instilled so much of the values within the Catholic Church, and he made sure that we understood where those rules came from. It was never about just do this or do that. It was, this is what is supposed to be done. This is why it's supposed to be done. Therefore, do it. And so I guess that group of people that I grew up with, we knew what it meant to be a part of the church, to be a part of the entire Catholic system. Even in education, the work that we did in the classroom, we had, for example, something so simple as religion classes, where a part of it was about the sacraments and the other part was about learning about our faith. And so that was definitely something that was instilled in all of us at that time in primary school years, which was from age 4 to 13. After I went to St. Catherine Academy, my role model, my mother figure, Sister Caritas was my principal. And at that time, I was blessed to still have some Sisters of Mercy on on the faculty, Sister Margaret, Sister Marcita, Sister Andretta, Sister Leonore. They were all a part of that system that still instilled with us mercy values. The entire system, the mercy system, and what it meant to be a Catholic in the mercy tradition, to look at the works of mercy, the corporal works of mercy, the spiritual works of mercy, and how to be good women out there. Women who loved God, women who did for others, women who cared for our society. And there was always that one thing that Sister Caritas would do: education is important. You are women. You have a role in life. God has a plan for you. And so that was never a doubt. And then I went to SJC, and again at that time I was privileged to have Jesuits on faculty. And they themselves, the way how they carried classes, the way how they executed their lessons, it was still something with that love, that the magis that we talk about, to do more for the students. And I think all those things were what influenced me to be a teacher. At SJC, that's where I started enjoying literature. I had amazing teachers all throughout high school, primary school, high school, junior college, and in seeing the work that they did, I was inspired. I was definitely inspired to do more literature in English and ask those important questions, you know, about life, about philosophy, about the church, about society, about politics, all these different questions we were allowed to ask. And it was okay, you know, and so we were able, and I was able, it wasn't me, I was able to have a deeper awareness of the things that mattered in life. So,
What Jesuits did you have in the classroom?
Father Hoyman.
Father Hoyman, okay.
I've had several others, but Father Hoyman was my favorite. He was
okay.
And I had several Jesuit volunteers as well.
Okay.
And so they themselves, actually my first philosophy class was with a Jesuit volunteer, Philosophy of Human Nature, will not forget it, really good. And that question is, does God exist? And if there's evil in the world, then where's God? Or if there's a God, then why aren't all things good? You know, and so that question just kept going, you know. So really, really amazing teachers there. So Father Hoyman is on my list. Yeah, we love Father Hoyman. Do you know Father Hoyman?
I know Father Hoyman very well.
Do you?
Yes, I do.
Isn't he the coolest?
He's great. We'll have to let him know that he got a big shout out on today's show.
Yes, shout out to Father Hoyman.
Definitely. And you talked about how your experience at SJC in particular led you to want to be a teacher. You know, and it sounds like getting to ask questions and not just kind of accepting, but really kind of mining the depth. What else, you know, was there something about what Father Hoyman did that you really admired as a teacher, and what was it? All
right, so there was, and I hope I don't get in trouble with this one, or don't get him in trouble, but there was, okay, let's be honest, at the sixth form, junior college, kids are kids. They are out there having fun, and Father Hoyman knew this. He accepted students for who they were. And there was one message that he gave at the end of each class, or at the beginning of the weekend. I know you're going to be partying, be safe. I know you're going to be drinking, drink responsibly. You know, so those were the things that for me was new. You know, you don't say these things to kids in a classroom. Like, I mean, you don't talk about the drinking, those are all things under the table. We don't do these things. But there's one instance, and he said, you know, I know a lot of you are going to be tempted to go have sex out there. I'm just asking you and pleading with you, be careful. Make decisions wisely. And it was never about, you should not have sex, you will be condemned, you will go to hell, or it was never like that. It was more of, I see you, but just be careful. Know what you're getting yourself into. Know what the consequences are. And for me, that I sat in that class and I was taken aback to say, wow. And this is a religious. And he understands that this is the culture that we're in. And this is the way that we need to speak to each other. As if I would just say, Dan, be careful. you know what you're going to do when you go take that extra beer. Not that you drink a beer or that you drink a beer. We don't do that. But if you were, right, I'd say be careful. It's a caution.
So sort of being realistic.
Very realistic.
And recognizing the population that he's working with and saying, look, guys, I'm going to treat you like adults because you're going to make your own decisions. Right. But I want to just remind you to really be mindful about those decisions you make.
And I do that now. The same way how he did that, I do that in my classes. Mm-hmm. And I'm very clear with the students, hey, if you're going to be drinking, make sure you drink enough water. If you're going to go with groups, stay with your groups. If you do not abandon each other, if you're girls, don't let go of each other. Make sure that you're watching each other. And I'd say that in the class. And they know that I'm meaning it. But this is what I learned. I was lucky to have really good teachers who instilled these values of caring for each other. I can remember my Holy Redeemer days. I had in those days they had to put us in line, in check, like their uniformity and kind of militant, but still we learned from those things. Going to high school, I do remember my year, that class of 1995, was one of the closest groups I've seen in many, many years, but we had great teachers, and we had those teachers who really cared. I can mention Diane Mejia, she had us as a homeroom teacher for 2 years, and so everything we did, she was like our mom. Like, can we do this? Can we do that? And she would do it, and we had so much fun together, clean fun, and we appreciated that time. I must mention, and I have to big up Robert Buckland, who, questionable with our debates, but, he was still a part of that team of people who cared for us. Like, they were never, too mushy or, come, let me take care of you. They kept their distance, but we knew that there was a level of respect for us, and we respected them. And, of course, at a junior college, I have to say, Javier Reyes was that person who was so instrumental in my career. Like, I knew that I wanted to study the humanities. I knew I wanted to study English and literature, and he was that person who guided me into doing that.
He was a lit professor?
Yes. He works at a Jesuit high school in Kansas right now, so he's still following the Jesuit traditions. And, that group of people, they knew how to nurture students in accepting who they were and yet giving them that space to be able to question. So that's one of the things that I learned, and I picked up on this. And with having studied literature, I got to ask many of the important questions, and I guess I'm very open to seeing how people respond and having that, compassion to understand what they're thinking and listening. And so all of that developed through Catholic education.
And it sounds like, one of the things that you experience and that it sounds like was important for you and now is important for you as a teacher is to kind of allow young people to find their space as adults.
Yeah.
And that part of that is exercising your freedom and then realizing that there are consequences. And to see and to open up a space to then, I would imagine, some of the people you mentioned, and I know you yourself are this person for a lot of young people, then to be able to talk afterwards and say, here's what happened. And to be able to have that compassion and say, yeah, let's talk about it.
Right.
Opening that door.
And I've seen how that works, where we have dialogue. Dialogue is so important. I've had, this weekend we were on a little retreat in Punta Gorda with some students, and there was a little incident that I said, okay, let's talk about it. Okay, you wanted to do this? Fine. Everybody gets a little punishment here. Nothing severe, just we're gonna go sleep early tonight. But we spoke about it afterwards, and I said, you do realize that I gave you this extension and then you took advantage. So do you see where you did wrong? And he came to me and said, yes, miss, I can see where I was being immature. I apologize for that. And sometimes that's all we need from the youth, from the young people, that to let them know where they made that little mistake. Instead of jumping at them and saying, you did this and now you're going to get punished. No, so let's talk about it. Where do you think you went wrong? Right? What did you do wrong? And how could you have done differently? And so like we said, the dialogue is very important. And that's one of the things that I learned through my Catholic education, which is, Catholic education is really good.
And being drawn to teaching, obviously, you talked a lot about what's drawn you to work with young people, but in terms of taking up that ministry, right, as a campus minister, what was that call for you? Because you've talked a lot about the teaching and about how you enjoy working with young people, but then to take it a step further and to say, leading young people to God, right? So what was that call like for you?
It was weird because there was a vacancy, there was an opening, and at the time, I had no intentions of doing it, none at all. I had seen the vacancy, and I was like, I can do that. I can plan a mass. I think I can get some people to read, and that's so easy. Who doesn't know how to do that, right? And so we had a huge mass coming up, and I just volunteered, hey, do you need any help with planning? We still hadn't gotten the campus minister. They hadn't hired anyone yet. And so I said, do you need help? And then I was called into the meeting, and they were like, would you consider applying for this position? I was like, I just wanted to help plan a mass. I didn't want to do anything else, but like, of course, I think I can do it. And
no good deed goes unpunished, by the way. Yes.
I can see that. When I was called in, and I said, well, they said, well, you fit the criteria, you can do this. We're giving this to you. Do you think you'd be able to manage it? And I'm thinking, wow, I don't know. I mean, I guess I can talk about God a little bit, like, go for it, set the world on fire, and we're done. So I accepted it, and then I realized, what did I do? What did I put myself into? And I sat in that office, and I'm looking around, and I'm thinking, where do I start? What is? We don't have any more masses to plan, so what do I do next? Like, should I plan the next mass? I really was. It was crazy, and so I at the time, I called Father Brian, who I sat with, and I.
What year is this, by the way?
This is 2015.
Okay.
2016, around that time.
Very good.
2016, and I said, I am pretty nervous. I don't know what to do. I don't know what I got myself into. I know what I like about the church, and I know what I really don't like about the church. Because there are some things that I really disagree with the church, and I'm sorry, and maybe you're going to edit this off or something. But I was thinking, how can I do this? What do I do? And he said to me, just meet them where they are. I said, well, can you give me more? What does that mean? Meet them where they are. And I said, okay. I seriously, at that time, I still did not know what that meant. I had no clue as to what he meant by meeting them where they are. And I'm getting all these kids, some weird kids, some super not pious. They were coming around because they knew me from the high school. Hey, Mrs. Espat, what's going on? And I said, I need your help. Come do this thing for me. I didn't know how else to get people into campus ministry, but I did know my students, the ones I had before, and I knew they weren't the kind of students who would want to be a part of a campus ministry. And let's face it, the term campus ministry has its little, little negative connotations for the larger population of students. They're thinking, it's all about God. That's boring. I mean, even today, if I send an email with campus ministry, nobody reads it because it's all about Church of God. So I had to find a way to get more people involved. That means anybody passing in front of me. You, come here. Come help me do this. Or you and you. I need help with this. Come and help me. And I had such a good relationship with my students that they couldn't tell me no. And so little by little, I got them saying, and they were like, so what happens in this room? And I said, whatever you wanted to happen in here, because I don't know myself. And I said, I think we do need to plan retreats, and I think we do have to plan these things. And And they're like, okay. I said, how can you help me? Well, I can do this. Okay, how can you help me? Okay, let's do it. Let's put our minds together. Let's do this together. And eventually they took ownership of the different activities, and I oversaw that it was meeting the criteria for whatever events we had to complete. And then the big retreat came up, Encounter Retreat, which I remember Father Brian saying, meet them where they are. Meet them where they are. And so I would ask them, what do you want to do? What do you expect to do? How can I help you? How can I serve you? And that's how the retreat started coming about. I got my first group leaders who came from both SJC and SCA, who had done Search, who had done Kairos. And okay, so this is similar. Do you want to do this again? Yeah, we're interested. Okay, let's start it all over again. And so that's how I ended up being in campus ministry, not necessarily knowing what I was doing, but I kept thinking, the line, Peter, you're a fisher of men. And then I'm starting thinking, but I did workshops on Jesus and his disciples, and what does discipleship mean? It means that we're targeting people who don't necessarily fit in that box. Mm-hmm. And thinking more about that, I realized that that's what I wanted for my campus ministry, that I needed to invite the students and the youths who do not fit into that box. Those kids who want to learn about Jesus, they don't say they do, they don't understand that they do, there's something missing in their lives, but they don't know what it is. But church, I don't know about church, I don't think I'm going to go to church. But they're missing something. And for some reason, God sends them. I don't know how it happens, but they get to my office, they get to my door, they knock, hey, can I come in? Sure. And once they're in, it's like they're sucked in. It's like Little House of Terrors. Is that it? Is that the name? Little House of Terrors?
The musical?
The flowers that suck you in.
Yeah, it's
my
the
office is like
musical,
that.
Little House of Horrors.
Yeah, but there was a movie.
Little house of horrors.
With the flower.
I'll stop that.
That's
the flower in the
edited.
basement.
Yeah, and it sucks you in. Okay, that's my office.
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me about, you're talking about the students and how they're not drawn to church, right? Mm-hmm. Well, of course, when we think of church, the church is the body of Christ. Right. The church is Christ, right? The presence of Christ in today's world. And it reminds me of, I don't know if you guys have ever had the experience of seeing a person or like hearing about a person. Let's say I don't know you, Melissa, and I see you and I make these snap judgments about you based off of just initial, I don't even know you, haven't talked to you, kind of see you from a distance, maybe heard about you from other people, and I make all these judgments in my head that are completely wrong, right? Like a couple of my best friends growing up, I had these snap judgments about them until I got to know them, until I spent time with them. And once I got to know them, and they got to know me, a great relationship, a great friendship was created, right? And I want to use that analogously for students with the church and with Christ, right? Because there's a lot of snap judgments that I think young people make when they hear about Jesus or hear about these other things. And like you're saying, they want it, but they don't know that they want it, right? Because once we come to encounter Christ, the Christ who loves us and walks with us in our lives, that meets us where we're at, right? It is life-changing, right? And it's always going to build us up. And it sounds like that's what God has you doing. And God has you sort of shaking expectations of the students and pulling them into something that they didn't expect but is life-giving. Right.
I have an example of a student, and I think she did a show for Guadalupe Media maybe during the COVID time, and she said she's a part of the St. Martin's Choir where she was. She was one of them that I just called just randomly. I had asked the youth group at St. Martin's to give me somebody who can help me sing. I just said, help me sing. And so they sent this little girl, and at the mass, I was like, oh, you're here, good, this is a song I want you to sing. And she's like, you mean I'm going to sing alone? Yeah, you're going to help me sing. So you're going to sing the song. And I said, you do have a beautiful voice, let me hear it. And she started singing, and I said, okay, after this, I want you to visit my office every time. And she's like, but you're in campus ministry. I said, yeah, I know I'm in campus ministry. So you're going to come and visit me. And she came in, and she's like, so what happens in here? I said, well, in here, you're going to sing. And so she got more friends to come in and sing. And she became one of my encounter leaders, not knowing that the day that I called her to sing was a day that she almost didn't go to church. And she said she was having a really bad day that time and very, issues going on at home. And I call her up and I just tell her, sing for me because you have a beautiful voice. And that changed everything for her. And she's found her relationship with God in a different way. And I see a lot of kids doing that I find a talent that they have, and I said, we can use this. The thing with Encounter Retreat is where they find Jesus. Our thing is that kids have been going to church all their lives, but they haven't really been going. They have been there, but they're not there. They're not present. And they go for various reasons. My parents are forcing me to go. And one thing that I've learned is that you never force a kid to go to church. You never force them. It has to be on their own. It has to be a decision that they want to make on their own. And so they block it out. And I've said, and many of them have told me, I go, but I listen to nothing. I'm just there, and I'm upset that I'm there, that I have to get out of my bed, and I have to be sitting in church, and I don't care. When they go to Encounter, they realize that they have always wanted that relationship with God. They've always seen the works of God. They have never named it as God's work. They have never said thank you for all these things. And so they get an opportunity to do that. They get an opportunity to really look back and think carefully as to what those blessings are in their lives. Where has God been all this time? Because that's a question they ask, where's God? I'm going through all this, so where's God? When they go to Encounter, they realize where he was all the time. And so that is in a way calling them back into the church. Needless to say that when they are going to church, well, they were going to church with their parents being forced, many of them dislike how the community within the church treats them, which is, and I think that's what you're gonna, I don't know if you're gonna get into that, but the community within the church tends to be very judgmental towards them, and that's what they keep saying, which is one of the bigger reasons that we don't see them finding Christ. There's this block, and the community is what blocks them, which is pretty sad.
Well, and I think, to that point, there might be people watching or listening who are thinking, why on earth would you work with young people?
Why not?
And that, because they don't understand what young people are going through. They don't understand why they're not showing up to church. It's very easy for them to have that kind of snap judgment that you were talking about, Ian. And so, maybe, what would your pitch be? Like, why do you like working with young people? What lights you on fire about being with these young people and helping them encounter God in their lives, helping them name that God has been present and is present in their lives?
My question is, when you say why, my question is why not? During the lockdown, and I think both Father Jeremy and I, we were like down and depressed. I was at the verge, I was in complete desolation. I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can't do campus ministry anymore. There's no... And as soon as we got back in, students bring life. Kids bring life. The joy that they bring into an office, there's no definition to describe that. To hear them give their versions of life, it's awakening sometimes, you get to see, well, for me, I get to see somebody else's culture, somebody else's experiences somebody else's consolation, someone else's desolation. And when you hear their perspective, it makes me as an adult see my flaws. You know, when they come in giving something so humorous, I realize this is their reality, this is their world, and they're inviting me to be a part of their world. And such a privilege. It is a privilege to understand what youths are going through. We had our time. Well, mine was just the other day. I was a youth just the other day. Like,
Us too.
That's right.
Just the other day. But still, like, you know, when we were there, nobody understood us. And we were baffled by why people wouldn't understand what we are and who we are. But we were products of our upbringings, and that's when an adult doesn't get you, when a parent doesn't get you, but you formed me. I am your monster that you created, you know? So why don't you get me? And so when they're in my office, and I hope this makes sense, but when they're in my office, I get to see that part of them that a parent created, that a parent nurtured, or a parent has given me to work with.
And to that question, I want to maybe hone in on that, because you talk about them inviting you into their world. I'm wondering what kind of challenges are young people facing here in Belize in particular?
Okay, so first of all, I want to go back to the synodal process that we had earlier this year. And this is the same question that was asked: why is there a disconnect between the church and youth? The responses that we had when we did ours at SJC was that they felt that the church judges them. And it's by the church I'm talking, and again, the church is the community of the people, and that's the new definition that we would give it, at least for this context. But the community of people who attend the church, that they are extremely judgmental of them. They criticize them too much. And this is one of the things that I have seen, especially through Encounter, that I have noticed, and it's a recurring problem, that there is a gap or a miscommunication between parents and children, that they feel that their parents don't get them, that the parents have too much expectations of them. I think to a certain extent, you know, when many parents live their lives through their children, and they set the standards really high, the bars are really, really, really high, and the children are feeling pressured. They feel pressure to meet those standards. And then on top of that, there's a lack of communication between parent and children. They just feel that, you know, especially fathers and sons, I don't know if it's a Belizean cultural issue where the father and the son cannot talk. You know, there is a disconnection. You know, they will go do your chores, go do this, but there's never that one-on-one conversation, which again talks about the relationship between fathers and sons. And a lot of them are they come from single parenting. So that's another issue too. But with the single parenting, what I have seen does not mean that I am raising a child on my own. I have no husband, or no, the husband can be there, the father can be there, but there's no relationship. So the mother has to take care of the child on her own. And the children notice this, you know, and I've heard it. My mom has to be both mom and dad. And my dad is there, but he doesn't have that connection with me. You know, so there is definitely a disconnection. Not being understood with creativity. Our youths today are so creative and artistic, and they want to express themselves, you know, and this is where the church does not understand that creativity. We still seem to be very stuck in a colonial system where if you have a different color hair, ooh, you're bad. You're emo if you have on like tattoos and earrings and purple hair. but that's just a way of expression, you know. And many times when I get to talk to young people who do have the tattoos and who do have the piercing and the hair, and you know, Leviticus says that you should not. That's not why they did it. They're not honoring pagan gods. They just did it because they wanted to express themselves, and they thought it was pretty cool, and they thought it was lovely to have green and purple hair. Not that I would agree that it's lovely, but they see it as lovely.
You would never have green or purple hair for yourself?
Maybe
Not
purple.
anymore.
I could see Dan with like
Green? Purple?
lime green. No, maybe like a dark red. You get the
Just think
strawberry.
about it.
Yes.
Dark red.
Imagine. Take a moment.
I'd want to do a blue streak down the middle.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
But he then would be excommunicated by the church.
Well, it's interesting that what you bring up about being judgmental, because Dan and I did a synodal conversation with guys at the prison, and they really said the same thing. And it wasn't about like the church is in, you know, not necessarily the ecclesiology, the hierarchy, but like the
community,
the people, the community feeling those men feeling judged in those places, maybe judged for reputations that they have, right? Or maybe being judged for the clothing that they're wearing. And so I think that's something we've heard across.
We hear it though, but nothing is done, and we're seeing that there is a problem because there is a gap between the church and the times. You know, Dan, I have taken a few courses in theology, and you know, in one of those courses, I learned that the Holy Spirit moves with the times and the places. And so the Holy Spirit bends to our needs and bends to our situations. Am I right?
I'd say so. I mean, I think one of my favorite lines in Romans is that, you know, when we don't have the words in prayer, the Holy Spirit can kind of speak through us, groan through us.
Yeah, I can be certified now.
Yes.
But apart from that, if the Holy Spirit bends, why is it that the community of the Catholic Church is linear, not bendable, not flexible to change?
On that point, then, like, how do you think it can? Like, where might that flexibility
I was just going to give that example.
Yeah.
So, for the September celebrations, when we were looking at the videos of the parade, there was a float, a Jesus float. So there was this man carrying a cross. I don't think it was a Catholic church that sent that float, right? And behind the Jesus was a big truck with music. It was at Jerusalem. I know you know the dance. You know the dance as well. We should do it.
I have learned. Yeah.
What do you think we should do? If you were to rate this show, would you like your host to dance to Jerusalem?
Leave us a comment on Facebook or YouTube.
And my camera guys, you can say thumbs up or thumbs down. Like no. But anyway.
So they had a float behind the Jerusalem dance.
So they had this float, and behind it they were playing the Jerusalem, right? They had a huge crowd behind this float, and they were all dancing and praising Jesus, right? Can you see ourselves doing that? That's the way how the Holy Spirit moves. There was nothing wrong with that dancing. There was nothing wrong with that praising. It was happy, right? And it is a part of our culture to hear music and be moved by music and dance to this. That's how the Holy Spirit moves. Our entire Garifuna choir, for example, our Garifuna masses, you've seen it. That, by the way, is the #1 mass that students attend. They love that mass because it is so, in their words, so lively. It has life. It has meaning, but it also has drums. It has dancing. It has singing in a different language, you know. It's something different. The Holy Spirit is there. It's moving in people during that time. So this is where the church meets culture, meets young people. We need to adapt. We need to get to know what it is that our young people want. What are they searching for? What are they thirsty for? And the truth is, if we don't give them a safety place to do that, like a safe place to do that, a safety net to enjoy themselves culturally, then guess what? They're going to go find it somewhere else. They are going to lean toward something that is not as healthy or not as safe. And so this is why our young people are saying, well, they're too judgy. Well, if they're too judgy, I'm not just... We are dealing with a new generation of students who ask questions, who are boldly rebelling against a system, because they do believe that the church is a system of oppression and you're just forcing us to believe a certain thing when they're not seeing it the way how, for example, Encounter, like this is, I'm not forcing you to do anything. This is just you realizing what God has given you as a gift. And so this is where I think the church, there's a little compromise that needs to be done.
It sounds like what you're talking about is a lot of what Pope Francis has been talking about a church that's willing to kind of leave the building and get dirty.
Right.
And, like when you talked earlier about the student who wasn't going to go to Mass that day, or wasn't going to go to church, by you calling her, the church came to her.
Right.
And that, I think, is at the heart of, I think, what the Synod is trying to get. It's trying to listen in for it, and it's about listening.
Right.
There's a really deep sense of listening that maybe isn't happening, or isn't happening as much as it should.
Right.
And that you're modeling and you're inviting the church to do as well.
Yeah, and one of the things I think, kids are really concerned about, or young people concerned about justice, as the church is, right? And you talked about earlier about the works of mercy, and especially the corporal works of mercy. I think that's something that we don't focus on enough as a church, to invite people and say, hey, come help us make the world a better place by these very simple things of giving food, giving drink, clothing people, like going out and encountering people in the streets, right? I think that's something that I've been drawn to personally, especially when I was in my early 20s, right? And I wanted to serve people. It was, the church has a deep tradition in history, just like Christ, right? What was Christ doing? He was feeding people, right? He was giving water. He was walking with people. Yeah.
I just wanted to share something that our philosophy classes, one of my philosophy classes, they do. Well, SJC asks that students complete certain hours of community service, and so through my class, I do require them to complete these hours. So one philosophy class has discussed it, has decided to celebrate a mass and it goes under the corporal works of mercy, bury the dead. We remember that there was, during COVID, during the lockdown, so many homeless people died. They did not get a proper, in fact, at no time does a homeless person get a proper burial.
Where are they buried, do you know?
I'm not sure. I think City Council takes care of that, and they just dig a hole and dump them in.
Like a potter's field.
Yeah. So our students will be celebrating a mass at the end of the semester for all the homeless people who have died, or since 2019. They're doing their research as to how many people have died.
Wow. And
they will have a funeral service for them.
That's wonderful. That's
so
really
I'm so proud of them, and they're going to do an entire mass for them. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's beautiful, and what an example that they're giving for the rest of the church.
Right.
To kind of invite the rest of the community to remember that these are folks on the margins who need to be remembered.
Right.
Well, Melissa, we have one last question. Our tradition on our show is that we have a question that we ask our guests, but that we ourselves answer as well.
Okay.
And today's question is, what is a sacred place that is meaningful to you?
Do you want to go first?
No, you got to go first.
You got to go first.
Yeah. Sacred place. I went to a silent retreat earlier this year for summer. I had my spiritual director told me to find a place that I can go and be happy. And the retreat house was in front of a lake, and there was a swing in front of the water, like immediately in front of the water. And it's here that in my prayers, I was able to have a conversation with Jesus. And in my prayer, my two motherly figures appeared to me. My mom, who passed away in October, and Sister Caritas, who passed away 2 days before my mom. And both of them gave me messages of love. And it was a beautiful place. In fact, I have a picture of it, and my spiritual director said, whenever you're feeling like you're lost, remember this place. Remember prayer, and remember that they're there. So I'd say that one's for me.
And what retreat house were you at?
It's Oshkosh in Wisconsin.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
very cool.
The Jesuit retreat
That's
house
great.
there. Beautiful.
Great.
Thanks for sharing. Ian?
This is going to sound a little strange, but my parents' garage, actually. During the pandemic in 2020, I had been visiting my folks, and then when the pandemic basically struck and our provincial sent out a no non-essential travel notice while I was at home with my family, I ended up getting basically stuck at my parents' house for 2.5 months, which is super strange for a Jesuit to be living outside a community during that time. But during that time, my parents had just moved to this new house, and so it was a new place for me, different state. My parents moved from Texas to Kansas, and so it was a new place for me. But then during that time, it really became home, right? So when I go visit my parents, it does feel like I'm going home, because I spent this really strange, long period of time there. But my dad and I, and often my mom, would kind of just hang out in the garage in the evenings. My dad would be at work during the day, and I was a student, so I was just doing school at home. And at the end of the day, I'd kind of be sitting out front, just kind of waiting for my dad to get home. And we would sit out front and maybe have a beer, maybe, just hang out, talk, and then watch the sunset go down because it was facing west. So kind of a strange, holy place, but a place that became, and then when my brothers are there hanging out in front of there is, it just has a lot of good memories attached to it. So yeah, my parents' garage, a little strange. But Dan, what about you?
I think for me, maybe this is a bit of a cliche, but I'm going to say the church where I was baptized, College Church in St. Louis. And I'll say that because it's just a spot where so much of my life has taken place. It's where I was baptized. It's where my parents were married, not in that order.
It's okay if it were.
And then going to school there and being able to go to Mass there, where you'd have 1,000 young people at Mass every Sunday night at 10 o'clock. And it was just a very special place, and it could be the place where I get ordained.
Yeah.
And so there's something about that is very special. And it's a very, it's not a super ornate church. There are ornate features, but it's a very simple space, and it's just beautiful. And the community is beautiful. So I would say I've encountered God a lot there, and every time I'm there, I'm very grateful for that space.
Well, that concludes our show for the day. Miss Melissa Espat, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And we'll have to get you back on so you can level the tally with Father Jeremy.
I made
maybe
it.
Twice, so you can one up.
Melissa already invited you to leave us a comment on Facebook or YouTube. If you want to see us dance the Jerusalem dance, you better let us know, because we're not doing it otherwise, that's for sure. But we want to thank you again for being with us today, and we'll see you next time.